The billionaire lived in a mansion so big that it was easy to forget the world outside. Every morning he woke up early, drank his coffee while reading reports, and went straight to work. He had built his empire from scratch, and he was proud of what he had accomplished. Money, power, and success had always been his main goals. But in the midst of all this, he sometimes forgot about the little things that really mattered. His young son was growing up in that mansion, surrounded by luxury, toys, and every comfort a child could want. But the child often felt lonely. His father was busy with work, meetings, and trips. There were nannies and maids in the house, but none of them could replace the warmth and attention of a parent. The maid had been with the family for many years. She was not just someone who cleaned the house or cooked meals. She cared for the child as if he were her own. Every day she would make sure he had breakfast, dressed properly, and was ready for school or play. She noticed when he was sad, when he needed comfort, or when he wanted to talk. She spent hours reading stories to him, playing games, and making him laugh. To her, the child's happiness was more important than anything else. One afternoon, the billionaire decided to surprise everyone. He had a rare free day and thought he would come home early. The mansion was usually quiet in the afternoons, with most of the staff doing chores and the child playing alone in his room or the garden. Today, the silence would be broken. As he walked through the front door, he heard soft laughter. Curious, he followed the sound. He peeked into the living room and saw something that made him stop in his tracks. The maid was sitting on the floor, reading a colorful picture book to his son. She was pointing at the illustrations, making funny voices for different characters, and the child was giggling uncontrollably. She had her arm around him, keeping him close and safe, and he was leaning against her with complete trust. For a moment, the billionaire felt a rush of emotions. Shock, confusion, and a little annoyance. He had always believed that childcare was the parent's responsibility, or that of a hired nanny. Yet here was his maid doing something he had never expected. But at the same time, he couldn't deny that the sight warmed his heart in a way he hadn't felt in years. He cleared his throat, and both the maid and his son looked up. The child waved cheerfully, but the maid immediately straightened up, a hint of nervousness in her eyes. She knew she had overstepped, at least in the traditional sense, but she had only acted out of love and concern. "Why are you looking after him like this?" the billionaire asked, trying to keep his voice calm.
"I thought your job was to clean, cook, and help around the house, not—"
"This." The maid took a deep breath. She didn't want to sound disrespectful, but she wanted to be honest. "Sir, I noticed that he was feeling a little lonely. You are always so busy, and I thought he could use some company. I didn't mean to overstep. I just wanted to make sure he felt happy and cared for." The billionaire stared at her, trying to understand. Her words were simple, but they carried so much sincerity. He looked down at his son, who was still smiling and clapping his hands, completely at ease. It was clear that the child felt safe and loved in the maid's care. He walked closer and watched them for a few more minutes. The way she interacted with his son was natural, gentle, and full of warmth. She laughed when the child made a joke, comforted him when he tripped over a toy, and encouraged him to finish reading a page from the book. It was a side of human connection that he had almost forgotten existed. The billionaire felt a strange mixture of pride and guilt. Pride because his son was happy and well taken care of. Guilt because he realized he had been so absorbed in work that he had missed many moments like this. His child needed him, but he hadn't been there enough. "I didn't know you cared this much," he said softly, almost to himself. The maid looked up, surprised. "Sir? I didn't know anyone could care so much about him without being his parent." "You've done more than I expected, and he clearly enjoys being with you." The maid felt a mix of relief and appreciation. She wasn't trying to seek praise, but hearing this from the billionaire meant something. She had always respected him and feared disappointing him, but she also believed in doing the right thing for the child. The child, sensing the shift in his father's tone, ran to him and hugged him tightly. "Daddy, look!" "She read me a funny story." The billionaire bent down, smiling despite himself. "I see that. You look very happy." For the first time in a long while, he stayed in that moment. He watched his son laugh, saw the trust in his eyes, and noticed the genuine care the maid had given him. It was a reminder that love and attention could not be bought with money or power. It had to be given, freely and wholeheartedly. Over the next hour, the billionaire stayed there quietly. He watched as the maid taught his son a new game and helped him with a puzzle. He saw how patient she was, never raising her voice, never rushing, and always encouraging. The child was thriving under her care. When it was finally time for the child to have a snack, the maid helped him wash his hands and prepared a small plate for him. The billionaire observed from a distance, realizing that this simple act of kindness was shaping his child's day more than any expensive toy or gadget could. By the end of the afternoon, the billionaire felt a change inside him. He had always believed that wealth and discipline were the most important lessons he could give his son. But watching the maid, he realized that kindness, attention, and emotional support mattered even more. He had been blind to this for too long. He cleared his throat again, and both the maid and his son turned to him. "I need to say something," he began. "I've always thought that my way of doing things was the only way. But today I see that care and love take many forms. Thank you for looking after him." The maid smiled warmly, feeling a sense of acknowledgement that she had never received before. The child clapped his hands and said, "See, Daddy? She's the best." In that quiet moment, the billionaire realized that the world outside, with all its meetings, deals, and pressures, was not the only place where value was measured. The love and care his son received, even from someone who was not family by blood, was priceless. It had the power to shape his child's happiness and future. As he left the room that evening, he carried with him a new understanding. He knew that he had work to do, not in the office, but in his home. He needed to be more present, more attentive, and more open to those who cared for his family. And he needed to trust that genuine love often came from the most unexpected places. That day, the billionaire learned a lesson that would stay with him forever. True wealth is not in money, but in the connections we make, the care we give, and the love that surrounds us. And sometimes those lessons come from the most humble and devoted people we least expect. The next morning, the billionaire woke up with a strange mixture of emotions. Part of him felt impressed with the maid's dedication, yet another part felt a lingering unease. He could not deny how happy his son had been the previous day, but the idea that someone else was so intimately involved in his child's life without his permission bothered him. He realized he needed answers, and he wanted them soon. He went to the kitchen where the maid was preparing breakfast. The aroma of fresh bread and coffee filled the air, and the sound of pans clinking made the room feel alive. The child was sitting at the table, eagerly waiting for food, his hair messy but his eyes bright and full of life. The billionaire cleared his throat. The maid looked up immediately, noticing the serious tone in his voice. She wiped her hands on her apron and waited patiently, though she felt a small knot of worry in her stomach. "I want to talk to you," he said. There was no anger in his voice, but there was firmness. She nodded and followed him into the study, leaving the child to eat his breakfast. Once they were alone, the billionaire took a seat behind his desk. The maid stood quietly, hands clasped in front of her. The silence stretched for a moment before he spoke. "I want to understand why you were looking after my son yesterday," he began. "It is not part of your duties, yet you spent hours with him. Tell me honestly, why did you do it?" The maid took a deep breath. She had prepared herself for this moment in her mind, knowing that honesty was her only choice. "Sir, I noticed that he seemed lonely," she explained. "You're always so busy, and the nannies follow schedules and rules. But he needed attention, love, and comfort that no one else could give him at that moment. I only wanted to make sure he was happy and safe. I did not intend to disrespect you or overstep my boundaries." The billionaire listened carefully. He could hear the truth in her words. She spoke calmly, with sincerity, without hesitation or pretension. Her dedication to his son was obvious, but it still made him uneasy. His mind raced. He had always believed that as a parent, he needed to control every aspect of his child's upbringing. Now he was faced with someone else stepping into that role, someone he had never imagined would matter so much. He leaned back in his chair, trying to process everything. "Do you understand how unusual this is?" he asked. "A maid is not supposed to take on parental responsibilities. I have rules in this house. You are supposed to clean, cook, and assist, not replace me or the nannies." The maid nodded respectfully. "I understand, sir. I only acted out of concern for him. I see now that I should have spoken to you first, but I could not bear to see him upset or lonely. My actions came from my heart, not from a desire to take your place." The billionaire was quiet for a long time. He stared out the window, watching the garden where the child was playing alone after breakfast. He saw how he had missed so many small moments. The first step, the laughter at a silly joke, the way his son's eyes lit up when he discovered something new. His heart felt heavy. He realized that work and ambition had consumed him, leaving little room for connection. "I have to admit," he said finally, his voice softer. "Seeing you with him yesterday made me realize something important. I have been too focused on work. I thought I was providing for him, but I was missing the most important thing, being there for him emotionally. I had not realized how lonely he could be." The maid's expression softened, but she stayed composed. She had expected reprimand or anger, but instead, she heard reflection and honesty. "Sir," she said gently, "he deserves love and attention. All children do. I only wanted to fill the moments you couldn't be there. I never wanted to replace you." The billionaire nodded slowly. "I see that now. But I also need to understand boundaries. You are part of this household, but I cannot simply allow this to happen every day without discussion. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," she replied. "I understand. I will always respect your rules, but I will also continue to care for him as much as I can within those boundaries." He paused, studying her face. There was honesty in her eyes that he could not question. There was no deception, only genuine care. The realization struck him. In all his wealth and power, he had underestimated the value of someone who could truly nurture and connect with his child. "I will need time to adjust," he said, his tone softer now. "It is not easy for me to accept that someone else can care for my son in a way that I have not been able to." "I understand, sir," the maid replied. "Please know that my intention is always for his happiness." They sat in silence for a few more moments. The billionaire thought about how rare it was to find someone whose loyalty and care were so pure. He thought about the child's laughter, the comfort he had received, and the lessons he had already started to learn from observing this connection. He realized he needed to reflect on his own parenting. His son deserved more than expensive toys and grand gestures. He needed attention, presence, and emotional support. He needed to see his father genuinely engaged, loving, and available. As he finally rose from his chair, he looked at the maid with a new sense of respect. "I am not sure I know exactly how to move forward," he admitted. "But I do know this: your care for him cannot go unnoticed. I will think carefully about how to balance this." The maid nodded, understanding that this was a start. It was not a complete resolution, but it was progress. She returned to her duties quietly, but there was a renewed sense of purpose in her steps. Later that day, the billionaire spent time observing his son from a distance. He watched as the maid played a board game with him, helping him follow rules and encouraging fair play. He saw the child's eyes sparkle when he achieved a small victory, and he noticed how patient and kind the maid was, never losing her temper even when the child struggled. The billionaire reflected on his own behavior. He remembered the times he had scolded his son for minor mistakes or ignored his questions because of work calls. He realized that patience, encouragement, and presence were far more important than perfection or control. That evening, he had a quiet conversation with himself. He acknowledged that he had been too rigid, too focused on rules, and too concerned with appearances. He understood that true parenting involved emotional engagement, understanding, and love. The maid had shown him what this could look like, even without authority or position. The billionaire decided that changes needed to happen. He could not allow his child to grow up feeling neglected or distant. He needed to be more involved, to prioritize moments of connection over endless work schedules, and he needed to trust those around him who genuinely cared for his family. At the same time, he realized that he had to set clear expectations. He could not allow blurred lines to cause confusion or misunderstandings. He respected the maid's intentions, but he needed to ensure that boundaries were maintained for the child's benefit and for the household structure. The next day, he spoke again with the maid, this time in a calmer and more understanding tone. "I have thought a lot," he said. "I understand why you acted the way you did. Your care and patience are remarkable, and I appreciate your honesty. But I also want to make sure that we maintain clear boundaries so that everyone knows their role." The maid smiled faintly, feeling relief. "Yes, sir. I will follow your guidance and continue to care for him in the best way I can within those limits." He nodded. "Good. We will find a balance. You will continue to help him, but I also need to take responsibility for being more present in his life. It is time I step up as a father." For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope and clarity. He realized that parenting was not about control, rules, or appearances. It was about presence, understanding, and emotional connection. He saw that the maid's dedication had shown him the importance of these qualities in a way that money and authority never could. As he watched his son laughing with the maid later that afternoon, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. He understood that love often came from the most unexpected places, and that those who cared genuinely for others could teach lessons that no wealth could buy. The billionaire knew that the journey ahead would require change, patience, and self-reflection, but he was ready to face it. For the first time, he saw a path toward a closer, more loving relationship with his son, and he was determined to follow it. Days passed, and the billionaire began to observe the interactions between his son and the maid more closely. He had initially thought that watching them would make him uncomfortable, but instead he found himself fascinated by the connection they shared. He noticed the little details, the way the child's eyes lit up when the maid told a story, the gentle tone she used when explaining something new, and the calm patience she displayed when he became restless or upset. One afternoon, he found himself standing near the living room doorway, hidden just enough not to be seen. The child was building a tower with colorful blocks, and as expected, it wobbled and fell several times. Every time it fell, the child would sigh in frustration, but the maid stayed by his side, kneeling on the floor, guiding his hands and encouraging him to try again. Her patience was endless, and the child's face transformed from frustration to determination, then finally to joy when the tower stood tall. The billionaire realized that this was something he had never given his son before. He had taught lessons in discipline, rules, and achievement, but he had never taught patience, encouragement, or resilience in this gentle, loving way. He felt a pang of guilt, thinking about all the moments he had missed, all the milestones he had been too busy to witness. Later, he observed a different scene. The child had spilled some juice on the carpet. The maid knelt beside him, gently cleaning up the mess, all the while talking to him about being careful next time. She did not scold or reprimand. Instead, she made him feel safe and understood. The billionaire watched silently, realizing that this approach taught responsibility without fear. It was a form of nurturing that he had never fully grasped. That evening, the billionaire sat in his study, thinking about what he had seen. He remembered how he had felt during his own childhood: strict rules, little warmth, and constant pressure to succeed. He realized that his son could be experiencing the same feelings if he did not change his approach. Watching the maid had given him a new perspective, showing him that kindness and love were just as important as discipline. Over the next few days, he began to interact more with his son. He started small, asking him about his day, listening to his stories, and even joining in some of the games. At first it felt awkward, as if he was learning a new language. But the child responded with excitement, clearly happy to have his father's attention. He also started to include the maid in these moments, watching how naturally she engaged with both of them. She never tried to overshadow him or take control. Instead, she created an environment where his son felt safe and happy, and where he, the father, could start to bond without pressure. This teamwork slowly melted the billionaire's initial apprehension. One evening, the child refused to go to bed. He wanted to read another story, but it was late, and the billionaire knew it was time to sleep. The maid knelt beside him, explaining gently why bedtime was important, and tried to soothe him. When her words didn't work, the billionaire stepped in, sitting on the floor beside his son. He spoke softly, sharing a memory from his own childhood, and explained why sleep was necessary. To his surprise, the child listened. The combination of the maid's gentle guidance and his father's personal touch worked perfectly. It was a revelation for the billionaire. He realized that the maid was not replacing him. She was complementing him. Her care allowed him to be present in a way he had not been before. He could see how much his son needed both structure and love, and he began to understand that parenting was not about control, but about partnership and presence. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between the maid and the child grew even stronger, and so did the bond between father and son. The billionaire found himself looking forward to returning home from work, eager to witness small moments of joy and learning. He discovered that even brief interactions could be meaningful if approached with attention and care. He also noticed changes in his own behavior. He was more patient, more attentive, and more willing to listen. He began to understand the power of empathy, the ability to step into someone else's world and see life from their perspective. Watching the maid, he learned that true guidance came not from authority or instruction alone, but from understanding, encouragement, and presence. One afternoon, a minor accident occurred. The child tripped while running across the garden, scraping his knee. The maid immediately attended to him, cleaning the wound and comforting him. The billionaire rushed out as well, but instead of panic, he found himself feeling gratitude. He thanked the maid quietly, realizing how much trust and care she had shown. His child calmed down faster with her guidance than he ever could have alone. That evening, as they sat together after dinner, the billionaire shared a quiet conversation with the maid. "I have been observing you," he said, his voice calm and thoughtful. "You are teaching him more than I could have imagined. Your patience, your understanding, it is remarkable. I see now that I underestimated the value of presence and care. You have shown me how much a child needs love and attention." The maid smiled, touched by his words. "Sir, I am glad to help. He is a wonderful child. All I want is for him to be happy and feel safe." He nodded. "I understand that now, and I am starting to realize that I can also be there for him in ways I never thought possible. I don't need to do it alone, and I don't need to control everything. I just need to be present." The maid's eyes softened. She had worked in many households, but she had never encountered someone willing to reflect so deeply on their own shortcomings. She respected his honesty and could see that he genuinely wanted to improve as a parent. From that day forward, their interactions became more natural and harmonious. The billionaire no longer felt threatened by the maid's care. Instead, he welcomed it. He began participating more actively in playtime, storytelling, and even the small chores that involved his son. He realized that these moments, though seemingly small, built trust and emotional security. The child, sensing the change, responded with joy and curiosity. He felt the presence of both adults who cared deeply for him, one who guided him with love and patience, and one who shared his life experiences and lessons. The combination created a nurturing environment that he had never experienced before. The billionaire's friends noticed a change as well. When he occasionally spoke about his son, his tone was softer, warmer, and more reflective. He no longer boasted only about business successes. He began to share small victories of parenting and moments of connection that brought him genuine happiness. In the quiet of the evenings, he would sometimes watch the maid and his son from a distance, reflecting on the lessons he had learned. He understood now that love and care could not be measured by wealth or authority. The bond they shared was a reminder that genuine connection was priceless, and that those who give with their hearts teach lessons that money could never buy. The billionaire also began to realize the broader impact of these small moments. By embracing patience, empathy, and understanding, he was not only helping his son grow emotionally, but was also transforming himself. He discovered that parenting was a journey of mutual learning, where both the child and parent could grow together, guided by care, trust, and respect. In this period of observation and reflection, the billionaire felt a sense of gratitude. He had discovered a profound truth, that those who truly care, even without formal authority, can shape lives in the most meaningful ways. The maid had become more than an employee. She was a partner in nurturing his child's happiness and development. As the day ended, the billionaire sat in his study, thinking about the future. He understood that the road ahead required balance. He would need to participate fully in his son's life, trust the maid's guidance, and learn to embrace the power of patience and empathy. He was ready to take these lessons seriously and to be the father his child deserved. Watching the bond between his son and the maid had opened his heart, and he knew that change, however challenging, was necessary for the happiness of both his son and himself. Weeks had passed since the billionaire first noticed how much the maid cared for his son. He had spent time reflecting, observing, and slowly becoming more involved in his child's life. The change in the household was subtle at first. The child was happier, more confident, and more engaged. The billionaire himself was learning to be patient and attentive, discovering the power of emotional connection. One morning after breakfast, he called the maid into his study. There was a calm confidence in his voice that surprised her. She entered respectfully, wondering what this new conversation would bring. She expected guidance, perhaps instructions on how to adjust her role even further. But what came next was unexpected. "I want to make something clear," he began. "I have been thinking about the way you care for my son. It is not just your dedication that impresses me. It is the love, patience, and attention you give him every day. You have earned my trust, and I want to acknowledge that openly." The maid blinked, unsure of what he meant. "Sir, I mean that I trust you completely with his care," he said. "You are more than just a maid in this household. Your role is important, and I want everyone to know that your dedication is valued. You have helped me realize the kind of father I want to be, and I am grateful for that." The maid felt a mixture of surprise and gratitude. She had spent years serving the family, always hoping her efforts were appreciated. But this level of acknowledgement was far beyond anything she had imagined. She bowed her head slightly, smiling softly. "Thank you, sir. That means a great deal to me. I only want what is best for him." Word soon spread through the household that the billionaire had spoken about the maid's dedication. The other staff were surprised. In many homes of wealth and status, employees were rarely praised publicly, especially in such personal matters. Rumors circulated about the unusual closeness between the maid and the child, and some wondered how the billionaire could be so openly expressive about it. Despite the gossip, the billionaire was steadfast. He made a decision that shocked everyone. He allowed the maid to take on responsibilities that went beyond the usual expectations. She was given more trust in managing the child's daily routine, choosing activities, and even deciding on small matters related to his happiness and well-being. The billionaire observed this carefully, knowing that it was unconventional, but he had seen the positive effects firsthand. At first, some of the staff were skeptical. They whispered among themselves, questioning whether the billionaire was making a mistake. But he remained confident, watching the results speak for themselves. The child thrived under this new dynamic. He was joyful, confident, and secure, knowing that both his father and the maid cared deeply for him. The billionaire's friends and business associates were also surprised when he began mentioning the maid in conversations. He spoke with respect and admiration, highlighting her patience, her dedication, and the difference she had made in his child's life. Some were confused by his openness, expecting him to maintain a more reserved or authoritative stance, but he did not waver. He had realized that genuine care and love transcended social norms and expectations. One afternoon, the billionaire watched a quiet scene in the garden. The child was learning to ride a bicycle, and the maid was kneeling beside him, holding the bike steady. She encouraged him to keep trying when he wobbled and praised him for small successes. The billionaire stood at a distance, a rare smile on his face. He felt pride, not just for his son's progress, but for the way the maid's care created a supportive and joyful environment. He began to participate more actively as well. He helped his son practice balance, shared tips, and even joined in playful races around the garden. The child laughed and shouted with excitement, thrilled to have both his father and the maid guiding him. It was a harmonious blend of love, attention, and encouragement that created a sense of security and joy. The billionaire's transformation became evident to everyone in the household. He no longer prioritized work above all else. He made time for play, conversation, and emotional engagement. He noticed small details about his son's moods, preferences, and interests. He also recognized the maid's invaluable role and treated her with respect, valuing her judgment and trusting her instincts. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, the billionaire reflected on how far things had come. "I used to think that being a good parent meant providing wealth, rules, and structure," he said quietly, almost to himself. "But now I see that love, patience, and understanding matter even more. I have learned that presence is more important than control." The maid listened, her heart warmed by his words. "Sir, you are learning what many people take a lifetime to understand. Being present, being patient, and showing love, it is the most valuable gift you can give him." He nodded. "Yes, and you have taught me that in ways I could never have imagined. I am grateful for your guidance, even though it was never intentional in that way. You have helped me grow as a father, and I will not forget it." The child, sensing the warmth in the room, snuggled close to the maid and then looked up at his father. "Daddy, she's the best at helping me," he said happily. The billionaire laughed softly, feeling a deep sense of connection. "I see that," he said, smiling at both of them. "And I am learning every day from both of you." In the days that followed, the household settled into a new rhythm. The child flourished. The billionaire became more attentive and emotionally engaged. and the maid continued her devoted care with confidence, knowing she was trusted and appreciated. The bond between the three of them created a sense of harmony and joy that had been missing for years. The billionaire's friends and acquaintances eventually grew to understand the change as well. They saw the positive impact on the child and recognized the billionaire's growth as a parent. They admired his willingness to embrace a new perspective and to value genuine care above social expectations or appearances. One afternoon, while walking through the garden, the billionaire reflected on the lessons he had learned. He realized that life was not just about wealth, success, or control. True fulfillment came from meaningful connections, trust, and love. The maid had shown him that the most profound influence often comes from those who act out of the heart, rather than duty. And he was grateful for it. He decided that the acknowledgement of the maid's role would not remain private. He shared his thoughts with the household staff, expressing respect and gratitude. He made it clear that her guidance and care were valued, and that her contribution to his son's happiness was essential. This open acknowledgement was unusual, and it created a sense of respect and admiration among the staff, who had never seen such transparency from someone of his status. Through all of this, the child grew up surrounded by love, care, and guidance. He learned patience, resilience, and confidence from the maid, and he learned presence, attention, and personal connection from his father. Together, they created a nurturing environment where the child could thrive emotionally, socially, and mentally. The billionaire's decision to trust and value the maid had shocked everyone at first, but the results spoke for themselves. The household was happier, more harmonious, and filled with warmth. The billionaire had discovered that acknowledging the dedication of those who care deeply could create profound change, not just in his child's life but in his own as well. As the evening sun cast a golden glow over the mansion, the billionaire sat quietly watching the maid and his son play together in the garden. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, understanding that true happiness and fulfillment came from nurturing relationships, showing love, and embracing the value of genuine care. He had made a choice that surprised everyone, but it was a choice that transformed his household and brought joy to the most important people in his life. Over the next few months, the household settled into a rhythm that was both unexpected and deeply comforting. The billionaire had changed. He was no longer the distant, work-obsessed man who had once measured success only in money and power. Instead, he was more present, more patient, and more aware of the small but meaningful moments that shaped his child's life. The child thrived in this new environment. He laughed more freely, learned more confidently, and felt secure knowing he was surrounded by adults who cared deeply for him. The maid continued her devoted care, guiding him with patience and kindness, while the father engaged with him emotionally, sharing stories, lessons, and laughter. Together, they created a nurturing balance that fostered the child's growth in ways the billionaire had never anticipated. One morning, as sunlight poured into the garden, the billionaire watched his son and the maid building a small wooden playhouse. The child was hammering with concentration, occasionally dropping the nails or making a crooked line. The maid stayed beside him, guiding his hands gently and offering encouragement when needed. The billionaire stepped closer, offering tips, showing how to hold the hammer correctly and celebrating each small achievement. The child's face lit up with pride, and the father felt a warmth in his chest that no business deal could ever give him. It was in these moments that the billionaire realized the full impact of trust and collaboration. He no longer saw the maid as just an employee. She was a partner in creating a loving and supportive environment. Her guidance allowed him to connect with his son in ways that were meaningful, and her patience taught him lessons about empathy, understanding, and humility. The household staff noticed the transformation as well. They saw the billionaire laugh, kneel on the floor, and play games with his son. They observed the open respect he showed the maid, acknowledging her contributions and trusting her decisions regarding the child's care. The change in tone, behavior, and atmosphere was remarkable, creating a harmonious environment where everyone felt valued and respected. One afternoon, the billionaire called the maid to his study. He wanted to share his reflections, not as a reprimand or direction, but as honest acknowledgement. "I have been thinking a lot," he said. "You have taught me something I could never learn from money, authority, or even my own experience. You have shown me how love, patience, and care shape a child's life. I am grateful for that." The maid felt touched but remained humble. "Sir, I am happy to help. It is my duty and my joy to see him happy and safe. You have also stepped into his life in ways that matter greatly. He benefits from both of us in different but important ways." He nodded, realizing that true parenting was not about doing everything alone, but about recognizing the value of those who genuinely cared. "Yes," he said. "I understand now that trust and collaboration are as important as rules and discipline. I will continue to learn from this, and I want to make sure you know how much I value your care and dedication." Meanwhile, the child continued to flourish. His confidence grew as he mastered new skills, both physical and emotional. The billionaire observed him navigating challenges, supported by the maid's patience and his father's guidance. He noticed the small moments of pride in the child's eyes when he achieved something independently, and he understood that these were the real markers of growth and happiness. The billionaire also began to notice the subtle impact on himself. He was more patient, more empathetic, and more attuned to emotions, both his own and others. He realized that the act of nurturing someone else, especially his child, had transformed his perspective on life, success, and fulfillment. He started to value emotional wealth as much as material wealth, understanding that the connections he fostered with loved ones were the true measure of a meaningful life. Friends and colleagues who visited the mansion began to notice the difference as well. They saw a man who had once been stern, serious, and distant now sharing laughs, telling stories, and playing games with a child. They observed the respect and trust between him and the maid, and they realized that genuine care and humility could profoundly change not only a household, but a person. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm golden light over the mansion, the billionaire sat quietly in the garden, reflecting on the journey. He thought about the days when he had been distant, focused only on work and appearances. He remembered the surprise, confusion, and gradual understanding he had experienced when he first saw the maid caring for his son. And he realized that this experience had reshaped not only his approach to parenting, but his understanding of life itself. He watched his son run toward him, laughing with the maid following closely, ready to guide and support. The child flung himself into his father's arms, giggling, and the billionaire held him tightly, savoring the warmth and trust in the moment. He glanced at the maid, who smiled softly, acknowledging the partnership and mutual respect that had formed. It was a simple, quiet scene, yet it contained more meaning than any business achievement or material possession ever could. The billionaire knew that life was a journey of learning, and this chapter had been one of the most important lessons he had ever received. He had learned humility, empathy, patience, and the value of genuine care. He had learned that love cannot be forced or bought. It must be given freely and nurtured consistently. And he had learned that those who care with their hearts can teach lessons that no wealth or status could provide. Over time, the household became a model of harmony and balance. The child thrived emotionally, socially, and intellectually. The billionaire became a more engaged and loving parent, participating fully in his son's life while appreciating the support and guidance of the maid. The maid continued to provide dedicated care, her role respected and valued by both father and son. Together, they created an environment where love, trust, and patience flourished. The lessons extended beyond the walls of the mansion. The billionaire carried this new understanding into his work, relationships, and daily interactions. He approached challenges with empathy, sought collaboration, and recognized the importance of nurturing human connections. The experience had changed him fundamentally, teaching him that success without emotional depth is incomplete.